They are the deindustrializers of the country. They are the asset strippers. That's what, and they're heroes. We hero worship them. I don't mean people, the present company accepted, but the media, our culture has learned to hero worship them, and yet this is what they are. The Larry the Liquidator, you know, Chainsaw Al Dunlop, who ruthlessly have hollowed out the real wherewithal of the economy. And then there's the immoralist. And once upon a time, this is maybe also gets to why we're in the predicament we're in today. The immoralist was a parasite, and all even that is to say, the immoral Wall Street operator was a parasite. He was a speculator. He didn't produce anything worthwhile. He lived off what others were actually producing, even if they weren't just working people, even if they were manufacturers or other small businessmen. He was a parasite, and as a result, a violator of the work ethic and of all those Protestant virtues. Then what happened? A very famous right-wing anti-Semitic wingnut named Henry Ford decided in 1920 to publish a series of articles about the Jewish question and the international Jewish conspiracy. And Ford, like a lot of his ancestors, also hated Wall Street because they were parasites. He didn't like to borrow from Wall Street. And in that way, he was typical. But in some other way, he was new. Because what did he say this Wall Street conspiracy was now all about? It was about the development of a kind of corrupt mass consumer culture. And he saw Wall Street behind jazz, the movie business, pornographic magazines, the Black Sox scandal, believe it or not, and that it was in league with Bolshevism, believe that or not, in order to overthrow and undermine the basic values of Western civilization. He hated consumer culture. And so the immoralist then becomes, as a Wall Street, Wall Street becomes associated with this kind of mass consumption economy, and it leads us finally to what is the epilogue in my book, which is Wall Street as everyman, which kind of happened a little bit in these last 25 years. That is to say, all of us, not really, but many of us, kind of fell in love with the street and got involved in the street. Also, often was a place that we used to spectate about, but not participate. In the last 25 years, half of all of American families are invested in the street. And in the 90s particularly, they're passively through their pension funds, but they're there. They feel at a comfortable place. And you had this love affair with the street in the 90s. It was the latest version of Horace Greeley's Go West, Young Man, Make a Fortune, and you'll do it on Wall Street. And that has, I think, also something to do with sapping the will to resist the second Gilded Age. But all of that may soon be coming to an end thanks to the collapse, I think the imminent collapse of this economy, the disaster in Iraq, and I will prophesy the uprising of new social movements of the sort that characterized the first Gilded Age. Sorry to have gone on so long. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We really need a hamburger now. Okay, so Josh Ozersky, please join me in welcoming him.
Well, I feel a little bit emasculated because there's no way I can possibly stand up to that kind of impromptu eloquence. I lay things out in the kind of a more, orotund and sort of oratorical style in the book, and I'm going to do a more traditional reading, a couple of passages from the book. Essentially, the conceit of my book is that the hamburger transcends being a piece of meat, or rather ground beef, on a enriched white bun, and actually has a kind of a universal semiotic life as a living representative of America that has resisted all centrifugal pressure as it moves around the world. But I like hamburgers a lot, too, and so I don't consider it entirely as a semiotic unit, but also as a juicy sandwich whose the attachment of Americans to which is visceral and universal and fundamental on every level. So this is how the book starts out. I'm going to read a little bit about this, and then I'm going to give you a little bit about McDonald's. Naturally, there's no talking about hamburgers in America without talking about McDonald's. And its titanic scale inspired me to great heights of windbaggery. So this is the beginning of the book. Juicy broiled hamburgers with just the right touch of charcoal taste from the fire have become an American institution. So states the stentorian narrator of Beef Rings the Bell, a promotional film produced in 1960 by the Union Pacific Railroad. The UP had good reason to want to promote beef, but the tone of the film is telling. There is no apology, no exposition, no tendentious defense of beef or beef eating. Beef Rings the Bell simply assumes that its audience loves beef, and the hamburger's primacy as the American beef meal par excellence is taken for granted. Even the process of broiling the hamburgers is fun and promotes friendship and good fellowship. It's easy to laugh at the film's booming, hollow narration, which seems to embody every cliched convention of Cold War propaganda, with its paternal pomposity and tossed-off nostrums about the American way of life. And yet, it's true. Though today we would not put it so baldly, Beef Rings the Bell understands, isn't just a sandwich. It's a social nexus. Even before the hamburger became a universal signifier of imperialism abroad and unwholesomeness at home, it had a special semiotic power, a quality not shared even by other great American sandwiches, like the hot dog, the patty melt, the Dagwood, the Reuben, the po' boy, or even such totemic standards as fried chicken and apple pie. At the end of the day, nothing says America like a hamburger. But just what is the content of this beefy, juicy, bun-bound message? What do Americans think of when they think of the hamburger? A robust, succulent spheroid of fresh ground beef, the birthright of red-blooded citizens? Or a styrofoam-shrouded Big Mac, mass-produced to industrial specifications and served by wage slaves to an obese, brainwashed population? Is it a sizzling disk of goodness served in a roadside restaurant dense with local lore? Or the grim end product of a sinister secret empire of tormented animals and unspeakable slaughtering practices? Is it cooking or conformity? Is it cooking or commodity? An icon of freedom or the quintessence of conformity? So the deep question, which so deep I actually interrupted my own prose, which is always a sad thing to happen. Anyway, so I talk about the hamburger for a little while, how it was invented by essentially the White Castle Company in Wichita in 1916. It's a big theme of mine, is that the hamburger does have a beginning, kind of alpha point. And then I get into what I really think is sort of the central chapter of the book and the central part of this hamburger story in America, which is to say the story of McDonald's. And I'm just going to read you, I know I don't want to run too long either, so I'm just going to read you a couple of pages about that. This is a little bit about Ray Kroc, who was the, really the founder of McDonald's in any meaningful way and what he set up. This then was the ultimate triumph of Ray Kroc, a society of McDonald's franchisees, all living to established company set standards of quality, service, cleanliness, and value, producing hamburgers of 1.6 ounces of 100% ground chuck formed into a patty of 3 5/8 inches in diameter. The McDonald's hamburger, which made so many strivers rich, was juicy with a fat content between 17 and 20%, and was served with a 1/4 ounce of onion, a teaspoon of mustard, a tablespoon of ketchup, and a pickle 1 inch in diameter. It sat on an enriched white bun, pillowy and ethereal, to which a little sugar was added in order to make it caramelize better when toasted. It always had to be the same. The franchisees, obedient and prosperous, and with a free hand in promoting their stores, existed on a plane of dynamic point-of-service action that, to the outside, seemed the whole story of McDonald's. What was McDonald's, after all, except